What happens when you push someone so far they have nothing left to lose? You're about to find out. This isn't just a story of revenge, it's a story of rebirth from the ashes of betrayal. A powerful billionaire, a titan of the tech industry, discards his wife like a broken piece of hardware, leaving her with nothing but humiliation and the echo of his cruel words. He believed he had erased her, but he forgot one crucial detail. She was the architect of his first success, and in the silent years that followed, she wasn't just surviving, she was building. Get ready for a story that will make you question everything you think you know about power, loyalty, and the epic comeback of a woman who was left with nothing but went on to claim everything. The divorce papers felt like ice against Amelia Hayes' fingertips. They were impossibly thin, a few sheets of processed pulp that held the power to demolish a 20-year history. Across the polished mahogany table of the conference room on the 55th floor, her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, Alistair Finch, didn't even look at her. His gaze was fixed on the sprawling panorama of the city below, a concrete kingdom he believed he had conquered single-handedly. "Is this really necessary, Alistair?" Amelia's voice was a low tremor, betraying the composure she fought so desperately to maintain. "The clause. It leaves me with nothing." Alistair finally turned his head, his blue eyes as cold and sharp as the winter sky. He was handsome in that severe, expensive way, a jawline that looked carved from granite, silvering temples that bespoke distinction, not age, and a suit tailored so perfectly it seemed fused to his skin. He was the celebrated genius behind Finch Innovations, the man who had put a Finch Nest smart hub in every third American home. To the world, he was a visionary. To Amelia, in that moment, he was a stranger. "Necessary?" He gave a short, mirthless laugh. "Amelia, it's business. You, of all people, should understand that. You were there when I drafted the prenuptial agreement. You signed it." "I signed it when we had nothing but a shared dream in a garage apartment," she countered, her voice rising. "I signed it because I loved you, and I believed we were a team. I never imagined you would use it as a weapon against me." His lawyer, a slick man named Richard Sterling, with a reptilian smile, cleared his throat. "Ms. Hayes, the agreement is ironclad. It clearly stipulates a one-time settlement of $50,000 in the event of dissolution. All assets, shares, and properties acquired during the marriage are the sole property of Mr. Finch, as they are tied directly to the corporation he founded." $50,000. It was an insult. It was the price of the landscaping at their Connecticut estate. It was less than what Alistair spent on the watches he collected. It was a pittance designed to humiliate. Amelia's mind reeled back through the years. She remembered the long nights she spent coding the foundational software for his first database prototype while he was out charming investors. She remembered selling her grandfather's car to pay for the servers they needed. She remembered managing the books, hiring the first employees, and turning their tiny apartment into a functioning office. She had been the co-architect of his empire, the silent partner whose name was on none of the official documents. She had sacrificed her own promising career in algorithmic design at MIT to fuel his. "And what about my contributions?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "What about the intellectual property I developed, the lines of code I wrote that are still buried deep in your legacy systems?" Alistair leaned forward, the mask of civility finally dropping. His voice was a venomous whisper. "Your contributions? You were a glorified secretary, Amelia. You kept the house running while I did the real work. You were a sounding board, a comfortable habit. But a habit is not an asset. You became dead weight. I need a partner who can keep up, not one who reminds me of a past I've outgrown." The words struck her with the physical force of a blow. Dead weight. That's all she was to him, the woman who had believed in him when no one else would. Standing behind him at every press conference, hosting dinners for investors, raising their two children who were now away at college, blissfully unaware that their family was being systematically dismantled. And then there was the other reason, the one the tabloids were already feasting on, Veronica Lane, a 26-year-old marketing VP at Finch Innovations, with a razor-sharp bob and an even sharper ambition. Amelia had seen the way Alistair looked at her at the last company gala. It was the same way he used to look at her, a lifetime ago. The meeting was over. There was nothing more to say. Richard Sterling slid a pen across the table. With a hand that shook so violently she had to steady it with her other, Amelia Hayes signed away her life. 2 days later, she was standing on the marble steps of the courthouse, a single certified check for $50,000 in her purse. Alistair hadn't even shown up. He'd sent his lawyer. As she watched the indifferent city traffic rush by, a black town car pulled up to the curb. The tinted rear window glided down, and Alistair looked out at her. He wasn't smiling. His expression was one of cool, final dismissal. "I'm having a few of your personal things sent to your friend Sarah's place," he said, his voice flat. "Don't try to contact me again. The children will be fine. My office will handle their tuition and expenses. As far as they need to know." This was mutual. Before she could form a reply, the window slid up, and the car merged seamlessly into the flow of traffic, disappearing. He had not only divorced her, he had erased her. That night, Amelia sat on a lumpy pull-out couch in her friend Sarah's spare room, surrounded by 4 cardboard boxes. They contained her clothes, some books, and a few photo albums. Her entire life reduced to a few cubic feet of cardboard. Sarah, a fiercely loyal art curator who had known Amelia since college, sat beside her, holding her hand and offering a glass of wine Amelia couldn't bring herself to drink. "He's a monster, Ames," Sarah said, her voice thick with anger. "A narcissistic, soulless monster." Amelia didn't respond. She was numb, a hollowed-out shell of the woman she used to be. She stared at the boxes, at the taped-up flaps that sealed away her past. She had no job, no home, and a bank account that would barely cover a few months of rent in this unforgiving city. For 20 years, she had been Mrs. Alistair Finch, a name that opened doors and commanded respect. Now she was just Amelia Hayes, a 45-year-old woman with a 20-year gap in her resume and a future that looked like a terrifying blank void. The gilded cage had been thrown open, only to reveal an iron door slammed shut in her face. As the city lights twinkled mockingly outside the window, despair washed over her in a suffocating wave. Alistair was right. She was nothing. He had won. The first few weeks were a blur of shame and sleepless nights. Amelia would wake up gasping for air, the phantom weight of Alistair's betrayal pressing down on her chest. During the day, she went through the motions. She sent her children carefully worded emails, assuring them she was fine, just taking some time for herself. She knew Alistair would have already spun his narrative, painting her as unstable or unfulfilled, the sad, predictable story of the billionaire's wife who just couldn't handle the pressure. Lying to her own children was another shard of glass in her heart, but she had to protect them from the ugly truth, for now. Her $50,000 was evaporating at an alarming rate. Sarah refused to take rent, but Amelia insisted on paying for groceries and utilities, clinging to the last vestiges of her pride. The pull-out couch became her world, a lumpy island in an ocean of uncertainty. She started looking for a job, a humbling and brutal process. Recruiters would glance at her resume, a BS and master's from MIT in computer science, followed by a 20-year chasm, and their eyes would glaze over. "What have you been doing for the last 2 decades, Ms. Hayes?" they'd ask, their tone dripping with polite condescension. "I was supporting my husband's career and raising a family," she'd reply, the words tasting like ash. In the cutthroat world of tech, a 20-year gap was a death sentence. She was a relic, a ghost from a bygone era of dial-up and floppy disks. After dozens of rejections for roles she was vastly overqualified for, in principle but utterly unqualified for in practice, she took the only job she could get, a low-level data entry position at a dreary, third-rate insurance company called Consolidated Indemnity. The office was a beige box of cubicles under the sickly hum of fluorescent lights. Her pay was $17 an hour. She, who had once managed a household budget in the millions, was now inputting accident reports into an antiquated system, her fingers flying over the keyboard with a muscle memory that felt like a cruel joke. Her co-workers were mostly young people just starting their careers or older ones who had long since given up. They treated her with a sort of gentle pity, the quiet, well-dressed older woman who had clearly fallen on hard times. They didn't know her name used to be Finch. To them, she was just Amelia, the new temp. The humiliation was a constant, bitter companion. Every keystroke was a reminder of how far she had fallen. One night, unable to sleep, she started unpacking the last of her boxes. This one was different. It wasn't filled with clothes or photo albums. It was heavy, filled with old textbooks from her MIT days, binders of notes, and several dusty external hard drives. At the bottom, nestled in a faded university sweatshirt, was a bound copy of her master's thesis. The title read, "The Oracle Engine, a Non-Linear Approach to Predictive Algorithmic Analysis." She ran her fingers over the embossed letters. The Oracle. It had been her passion project, her magnum opus. It was an algorithm designed not just to analyze past data, but to model and predict future outcomes of complex, chaotic systems like stock markets, supply chains, or even consumer behavior. With a startling degree of accuracy, it was revolutionary for its time, incorporating principles of chaos theory and machine learning in a way no one else was doing. She remembered showing the initial framework to a young, ambitious Alistair. He'd glanced at it, his eyes already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. "It's clever, Amelia," he'd said with a dismissive pat on her shoulder. "Very academic. But the real world doesn't run on theories. It runs on sales." He dismissed it. He dismissed her. Her heart began to pound, a frantic, unfamiliar rhythm. She found an old cable, blew the dust from a hard drive, and plugged it into Sarah's laptop. After a tense moment, the drive whirred to life. There it was, a folder simply labeled Oracle. Inside were thousands of lines of her original code, raw and unrefined, but brilliant. It was a digital ghost of the woman she used to be, the ambitious, fearless coder who believed she could change the world. A fire she thought had been extinguished long ago began to smolder. For the next few months, Amelia lived a double life. By day, she was the anonymous drone at Consolidated Indemnity, mind-numbingly typing numbers into a spreadsheet. But by night, she was a woman possessed. After Sarah went to bed, Amelia would work for hours at the small kitchen table, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating her face. She wasn't just revisiting her old code. She was rebuilding it from the ground up, integrating 2 decades of technological advancement she was rapidly teaching herself. She devoured articles, watched lectures, and taught herself new programming languages. The intellectual challenge was exhilarating, a lifeline in the suffocating sea of her new reality. Her menial job, once a source of shame, became an unexpected asset. Consolidated Indemnity's data systems were a mess, inefficient, chaotic, and disorganized. It was the perfect low-stakes testing ground. On her lunch breaks, she would copy anonymized data sets onto a flash drive, claims frequencies, risk assessments, client demographics. At night, she fed this real-world data into her reborn Oracle engine. The results were astonishing. Her algorithm began to spot patterns no human analyst could ever see. It predicted with 98% accuracy which clients were most likely to let their policies lapse. It identified fraudulent claims before they were even fully processed. It modeled the financial impact of a hurricane in the Gulf Coast on the company's portfolio down to the penny. It worked. It was more powerful than she had ever dreamed. One Friday, her department manager, a perpetually stressed man named Mr. Gable, was in a panic. A major corporate client was threatening to leave, a move that would cost the company millions and likely cost him his job. They couldn't figure out how to restructure their policy to keep them. The entire team of analysts was stumped. That weekend, Amelia took the client's data home. She fed it into the Oracle. On Monday morning, she walked into Mr. Gable's office and quietly placed a single sheet of paper on his desk. On it was a detailed 3-point plan, a series of specific, counterintuitive adjustments to their coverage and premium structure. Gable stared at it, then at her. "Where did you get this, Amelia? This is brilliant. It's a completely different approach." "I just saw a pattern in the numbers," she said simply. Skeptical but desperate, Gable presented her plan to the client. Not only did they stay, but they increased their portfolio. Gable was hailed as a hero. He called Amelia into his office, his face alight with a mixture of awe and confusion. "I don't know how you did it, but you saved my skin," he said. There's a junior analyst position opening up. It's not much more money, but it's a start. It's yours if you want it." Amelia smiled, a real, genuine smile for the first time in months. "Thank you, Mr. Gable. I appreciate that, but I think I have other plans." She walked out of the office, gave her 2 weeks' notice, and went home. The test was over. The ghost in the machine was awake, and it was hungry. She wasn't just Amelia Hayes, the failed wife. She was the creator of the Oracle engine, and she was just getting started. Leaving the soul-crushing security of consolidated indemnity was a leap of faith into a terrifying unknown. Amelia had a tool of immense power, but a tool was useless without a hand to wield it in the capital to support it. She spent the next 6 months refining her business plan and creating a stunning proof-of-concept demonstration. She registered a corporation, choosing the name with deliberate intent, Phoenix Analytics. She would rise from the ashes of her former life. Her plan was simple and audacious: to lease the Oracle engine's predictive power to high-stakes industries that lived and died by data: hedge funds, global logistics firms, and high-frequency traders. Phoenix wouldn't just provide data, it would provide foresight. With her presentation polished and her confidence bolstered by the undeniable power of her creation, she began her pilgrimage to the gods of venture capital. She started on Sand Hill Road, the legendary strip of asphalt in Silicon Valley, where fortunes were made and dreams were crushed with equal, dispassionate efficiency. The rejection was swift and brutal. She'd walk into boardrooms filled with men half her age in hoodies and expensive sneakers. They'd look at her, a middle-aged woman in a sensible blazer, with thinly veiled skepticism. They'd listen to her pitch, their eyes glued to their phones. The moment she mentioned her 20-year hiatus from the industry, a metaphorical curtain would fall. "The tech is interesting," one young VC told her, barely suppressing a yawn. "But we invest in founders with recent, relevant experience. The market has changed. We need someone who's lived and breathed it for the last decade, not taken a break." Another was more direct. "Look, Ms. Hayes, this smells like a hobby project. We need founders who are all in, 24/7. With your background, well, it's a tough sell." Her background, the polite euphemism for being a wife and mother. The very things she had been told were her life's purpose were now her greatest liabilities. Dozens of meetings ended the same way. Her savings dwindled. Desperation began to creep back in, a cold fog at the edges of her resolve. Alistair's voice echoed in her mind. Dead weight. Were they all seeing what he had seen? Just as she was about to give up, Sarah gave her a lead. "There's this guy, Benjamin Chen," she said over dinner one night. "He's an old guard legend. Ran one of the most successful funds in the 90s before he retired. He's a bit of a recluse now, but he makes a few angel investments a year. They call him the Dragon because he's notoriously tough, but he's also known for betting on the person, not just the pitch deck. I know someone who knows his assistant. I might be able to get you 5 minutes." It was a long shot, but it was the only one she had left. A week later, Amelia found herself in a serene, minimalist office overlooking the San Francisco Bay. There were no flashy logos or bustling assistants, just quiet elegance in a stunning view. Benjamin Chen was a small, immaculate man in his late 70s with a placid face and eyes that seemed to see everything. He didn't offer a handshake, but gestured for her to sit. "You have 10 minutes, Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "My assistant tells me you are persistent. Let's see if you are also persuasive." Amelia took a deep breath and began. She didn't use her flashy presentation. She simply opened her laptop and brought up the raw interface of the Oracle engine. She spoke about its architecture, its philosophical underpinnings in chaos theory, and its unique ability to learn. She showed him the consolidated indemnity case study, then ran a live simulation, feeding the Oracle real-time stock market data. She pointed to a small, obscure pharmaceutical stock. "The Oracle predicts this stock will jump at least 30% in the next 72 hours based on a confluence of factors: a pending patent ruling, a competitor's supply chain disruption, and unusual social media sentiment patterns that human analysts are currently dismissing as noise." Chen watched the screen, his expression unreadable. He asked a few sharp, incisive questions about her code, her scaling plans, her security protocols. She answered each one directly and without hesitation. She was in her element, the expert in her domain. Finally, he fell silent, his gaze fixed on her. "Fascinating technology," he said slowly. "But I have one more question. Why has a coder of your caliber been off the grid for 20 years? This was it, the moment of truth. Amelia met his gaze, unflinching. "I made a bad investment, Mr. Chen. I invested 2 decades of my life and my career in a startup that ultimately valued my contributions at zero. The founder was my husband, Alistair Finch." A flicker of recognition crossed Chen's face. "Finch," he mused. "I remember him. Arrogant young man. I passed on his seed round. He had a good product but a rotten character. I never invest in rotten characters." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "So this is a revenge play. You want to build a company to crush your ex-husband. Revenge is a byproduct, Mr. Chen." Amelia corrected him, her voice firm. "This is a reclamation. I am reclaiming my time, my intellect, and my name. I built his foundation. Now I'm going to build my own skyscraper on top of it. I'm not asking for your money because I want to get even. I'm asking for it because the Oracle engine is the single most powerful predictive analytics tool on the planet, and it will generate returns beyond anything you have ever seen." The silence stretched, thick with tension. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. Chen finally broke the silence with a slow, deliberate nod. "Most people who come in here try to sell me a story about changing the world," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "You are the first person in a very long time who has simply shown me that you can. Your motives are clean, they are your own. The technology is sound, and you have the dragon's fire in your belly. The best investments are made in times of adversity." He named a number, an investment for 20% equity, that made Amelia's head spin. It was 10 times what she had dared to ask for. "You will have a term sheet by the end of the day," Chen continued. "And one piece of advice, Ms. Hayes. When you build your skyscraper, do not be distracted by the rubble of the past. Focus on the sky." Amelia walked out of that office, feeling taller than she had in 20 years. She wasn't a ghost anymore. She was the CEO of Phoenix Analytics. And with Benjamin Chen's backing, she didn't just have wings, she had a dragon on her side. The game had changed. The 5 years that followed were a whirlwind of relentless work and meteoric clandestine growth. With Benjamin Chen's capital and mentorship, Phoenix Analytics was no longer just an idea, it was a force. Amelia, however, made a crucial strategic decision from the outset. She would remain a ghost. While tech CEOs like Alistair preened on magazine covers and gave self-aggrandizing talks at global conferences, Amelia Hayes kept her name and face out of the public eye. Phoenix Analytics operated in the shadows, a B2B powerhouse whose name was known only to the highest echelons of finance and industry. Their clients signed ironclad NDAs. Their headquarters was an unmarked building in a quiet industrial park. The company's public face was its COO, a steady and reliable executive handpicked by Chen, while Amelia remained the unseen architect, the master strategist pulling the strings. This anonymity served 2 purposes. First, it kept Alistair from ever knowing she was behind it. She knew his ego. He wouldn't be able to comprehend a threat he couldn't see, and he would never think to look for her in the world he believed he had expelled her from. Second, it allowed the Oracle engine's results to speak for themselves, uncolored by the messy human drama of her past. Phoenix wasn't a revenge story, it was a superior product. The Oracle was more successful than even she had imagined. For a top-tier hedge fund in New York, it predicted the collapse of a German conglomerate 6 months before the news broke, saving them billions. For a global shipping giant, it rerouted their entire fleet based on a prediction of a dockworkers' strike in Singapore, avoiding a catastrophic delay. It was like having a crystal ball powered by a supercomputer. The name Phoenix Analytics became a hushed legend on Wall Street, the ultimate competitive advantage that money could buy. Amelia built her team carefully, poaching talent not from the trendy startups, but from established old-school firms. She looked for people who were brilliant but overlooked, undervalued by bosses who prize flash over substance. Her star recruit was David Chen, no relation to Benjamin, a quiet, genius-level systems architect who had spent a decade at Finch Innovations. David had been the one to raise red flags about the growing instability of their core operating system, only to be personally humiliated and fired by Alistair in a team meeting for insubordination. David's insider knowledge of Finch's systems was invaluable, but it was his loyalty to Amelia's vision that was priceless. He, and others like him, who had been burned by Alistair's arrogance, formed the loyal core of her company. They weren't just employees, they were believers. While Phoenix ascended, Finch Innovations began to falter. Alistair, blinded by hubris, made a series of critical errors. He had become obsessed with his own legend. He poured billions into vanity projects, a sleek, overpriced electric car that never found a market, a disastrous foray into social media, and a line of designer smartwatches that were more fashion than function. He ignored the bedrock of his company, the smart home Nest ecosystem, and its technology began to feel clunky and outdated. Competitors, leaner and more innovative, started chipping away at his market share. Alistair's personal life was equally chaotic. His marriage to Veronica Lane was a tempestuous, headline-grabbing affair that ended in an even more acrimonious divorce than his first, costing him a significant chunk of his personal fortune. He was over-leveraged, borrowing heavily against his own company stock to fund his lavish lifestyle and increasingly risky business ventures. The visionary had become a gambler, and the house was starting to win. Amelia watched all of this from a distance, her Oracle engine tracking every misstep, every stock fluctuation, every piece of negative press. The algorithm compiled a complete, terrifyingly accurate picture of Finch Innovations' decline. It was a slow, creeping decay, a giant rotting from the inside out. The Oracle predicted that within 2 years, the company would face a major liquidity crisis. Amelia lived quietly. She had bought a modest but beautiful brownstone in the city, a place that was hers and hers alone. She reconnected with her children, now young adults, who were relieved and overjoyed to see their mother confident and thriving, even if they didn't fully understand the scope of her work. She told them she ran a small data consulting firm. There would be time for the whole truth later. One evening, Benjamin Chen visited her at home, a rare occurrence. They sat in her small garden, drinking tea as the sun set. "The Oracle tells me Alistair is planning something big," Amelia said, her voice calm and even. "A last desperate roll of the dice, a new fully integrated home ecosystem called the Finch Nexus. It's meant to be his magnum opus, linking all his disparate products together. He's betting the entire company on it." Benjamin sipped his tea, his ancient eyes watching her carefully. "And the Oracle also tells you it will fail?" "It will be a catastrophe," Amelia confirmed. "The underlying software is a patchwork of legacy code. It's unstable. And David tells me the core processor they're using has a critical flaw they haven't discovered yet. But more importantly, the market for it doesn't exist. People want simplicity, not a gilded cage for their data. Alistair is building a monument to himself, not a product for his customers." "So you will let him fail," Chen stated. It wasn't a question. "I will," Amelia said. "But I'm not just going to let him fall. I'm going to buy the ground he's about to hit." Chen nodded slowly. "The prey is wounded and walking into the snare. What is your plan?" Amelia's gaze was fixed on the darkening horizon, her expression unreadable. "His launch is in 6 months. On that day, his company will be at its most vulnerable. Its stock will be inflated with hype, and its failure will be all the more spectacular. I'm not just going to short his stock, Benjamin. That's not enough. I'm going to break him." For the first time, Chen saw not just the determined CEO, but a flicker of the woman scorned, the wife left with nothing. The dragon's fire was burning hotter than ever. This was no longer just business. This was a reckoning. The 6 months leading up to the Finch Nexus launch were the busiest of Amelia's life. She and her team at Phoenix worked with the quiet, brutal efficiency of a special operations unit preparing for an invasion. The mission was codenamed Operation Downfall. It had 2 phases: destabilize and acquire. Phase 1 began in the obscure world of intellectual property law. Using the Oracle engine, Amelia's team scanned millions of global patent filings, searching for vulnerabilities in the Nexus ecosystem. The Oracle, with its uncanny ability to connect disparate data points, found one. It was a tiny dormant patent for a specific data compression algorithm filed over a decade ago by a small, now defunct startup in Finland. The patent was obscure, but according to David Chen's analysis of the Nexus's leaked source code, it was absolutely essential to how the system managed video streaming. Finch's legal team, in their arrogance, had either missed it or dismissed it as irrelevant. Through a series of shell corporations so layered it would take years to unravel, Amelia bought the Finnish parent company that held the patent. The cost was negligible, a few $100,000. The patent was now hers. It was a single microscopic key, but she knew it could unlock the downfall of an empire. She now had her weapon. All she had to do was wait for the perfect moment to use it. Meanwhile, Alistair Finch was on a global media tour, a spectacular display of hubris and hype. He was on the cover of Wired and Forbes, proclaiming the Finch Nexus as the nervous system of the modern home, the next evolution of human-computer interaction. Wall Street bought into the hype, hook, line, and sinker. Analysts issued glowing buy ratings. Finch Innovation stock, which had been stagnant for years, began to climb, soaring to an all-time high in the week before the launch. Alistair was triumphant. At a lavish pre-launch party, he was quoted as saying, "This isn't just a product launch. This is my coronation." Amelia watched a clip of the party on her computer, a small, grim smile on her face. It's a coronation, all right, she thought. The coronation of a fool. The day of the launch arrived. It was a massive event held in San Francisco, live streamed to millions around the world. Alistair took the stage to thunderous applause, a rock star in a $1,000 blazer. He was in his element, charismatic and commanding, as he walked the audience through the Nexus's features. "The Finch Nexus will anticipate your needs before you do," he declared, his voice booming through the auditorium. "It will learn, adapt, and become an indispensable part of your family." In her quiet office across the bay, Amelia watched the stream with her legal team and Benjamin Chen. The atmosphere was calm, clinical, the eye of the storm. "He's selling a fantasy," David Chen murmured, shaking his head as he monitored the system's initial performance data. "The servers are already showing strain." Amelia waited until Alistair reached the crescendo of his speech, the moment he announced that the Finch Nexus was available for purchase, effective immediately. As the applause washed over him, Amelia nodded to her lead counsel. "Now." An email was sent. A process server walked into the Finch Innovations legal department and handed a paralegal a thick envelope. Inside was a cease and desist order and a notice of patent infringement, citing the obscure Finnish patent and demanding an immediate halt to all sales and distribution of the Finch Nexus. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Back at the launch event, a frantic aide rushed onto the stage and whispered into Alistair's ear. The confident smile on his face froze, then collapsed into a mask of confusion and rage. The live feed was abruptly cut. Within minutes, the news hit the wires. Finch Nexus launch halted by patent dispute. The bottom fell out. Panicked investors who had bought at the peak began selling, triggering a massive automated sell-off. The stock didn't just drop, it plummeted, falling off a cliff in a cascade of red. By the time the market closed, Finch Innovations had lost 40% of its value. Billions of dollars in market capitalization vaporized in a single afternoon. Alistair was trapped in a crisis from which there was no escape. The patent was legitimate. His legal team confirmed it within the hour. To re-engineer the Nexus without the infringing code would take months, if not years. The launch, his great coronation, was an unmitigated disaster. The media, which had lauded him just hours before, turned on him with predatory glee, calling it the most spectacular product failure in a decade. From her command center, Amelia watched the carnage unfold not with glee, but with a cold, detached satisfaction. This wasn't about emotion. This was about physics. An object, inflated by its own hot air, had finally met an immovable, precisely placed pin. "Phase 1 is complete," she announced to her team, her voice steady. The room was silent, the team watching her with a mixture of awe and trepidation. They had just witnessed a public execution, carried out with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Benjamin Chen looked at her, his expression one of deep respect. "The velvet hammer has fallen," he said quietly. "He is wounded, confused, and bleeding. He will be looking for someone to blame, but he will never think to look in your direction." Amelia turned from the screen showing Alistair's crumbling stock price. Her face was set like stone. "He's distracted by the wound," she said. "He won't see the predators circling until it's too late. It's time for phase 2. The aftermath of the Nexus debacle was a bloodbath. Alistair was in a state of apoplectic rage, firing executives, suing his own legal team for incompetence, and making frantic calls to Wall Street bankers, trying to stop the bleeding. He was hemorrhaging money, and his creditors were getting nervous. The company was deeply vulnerable, more so than at any point in its history. Alistair was so consumed with the who was the mysterious holding company that had ambushed him, that he failed to see the much larger threat gathering on the horizon. This was when Phase 2 of Operation Downfall began. Amelia activated a new shell corporation, one with a deliberately bland and powerful name, Orion Capital Partners. With Benjamin Chen's vast network and Phoenix Analytics' seemingly bottomless cash reserves, Orion Capital began to act. They didn't make a dramatic public takeover bid. That was Alistair's style, all flash and noise. Amelia's approach was silent and suffocating, like a python constricting its prey. Orion Capital started by buying the corporate debt of Finch Innovations from the banks that held it. With his company's value shattered, Alistair had violated the covenants on his loans, and the banks were more than happy to sell the distressed debt to Orion for pennies on the dollar. In a matter of weeks, Amelia, through Orion, became Alistair's biggest creditor. She now held the leash. Next, Orion began quietly buying up Finch Innovation stock. The price was so low it was practically a fire sale. They bought from panicked hedge funds, disillusioned institutional investors, and retired employees cashing out their life savings. They used the Oracle engine to execute thousands of small, anonymous trades that went unnoticed, slowly but surely accumulating a massive position. Alistair, meanwhile, was scrambling for a lifeline. He sought a white knight, a friendly corporation, to acquire Finch Innovations and save him from ruin. He entered talks with a major Japanese tech conglomerate, a deal that could have provided the capital he needed to survive. But Amelia was always one step ahead. The Oracle had predicted this exact move. Before Alistair even made the call, Phoenix Analytics had already prepared a detailed report for the Japanese firm's board of directors. The report, delivered anonymously, laid bare the rot within Finch Innovations, the crumbling infrastructure, the flawed product pipeline, the over-leveraged finances. It used data so precise and intimate that it seemed to come from inside the company itself. Faced with this undeniable evidence of deep-seated dysfunction, the Japanese conglomerate politely withdrew their offer. Alistair was cornered. One by one, every door he tried to open was slammed shut in his face. He felt like he was fighting a ghost, an invisible enemy that anticipated his every move. His paranoia grew, and his famous charisma curdled into a bitter, erratic rage that alienated his remaining allies on the board. After 3 months of relentless pressure, Orion Capital made its move. They announced that they had acquired 35% of Finch Innovations' outstanding shares, making them the largest single shareholder. They invoked their right to call an emergency meeting of the board of directors with a single item on the agenda, a vote of no confidence in the current CEO, and a proposal for a complete restructuring. The day of the board meeting was gray and overcast, the sky threatening a storm that mirrored the one about to break in the Finch Innovations Tower. Alistair Finch entered the boardroom he had commanded for over 2 decades with a defiant swagger, though the dark circles under his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. He knew he was in for a fight, but he still believed he could win. He had handpicked most of this board. They were his friends, men who owed their careers to him. He was sure he could rally them against this faceless corporate raider, this Orion Capital. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alistair began, his voice tight with controlled fury, "we are under attack by a parasitic entity seeking to dismantle this great company for a quick profit. But they have underestimated our resolve. They have underestimated me." The chairman of the board, a man named Arthur Vance, cleared his throat nervously. "Alistair, we have to hear them out. The representatives from Orion Capital are waiting." "Then let them in," Alistair sneered. Let's see the vultures who have come to pick at the bones. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open. The assembled board members, all men in dark suits, turned to see who would enter. They expected a team of aggressive corporate lawyers or bankers. Instead, a single woman walked in. She was poised, elegant, and radiated an aura of unshakable calm. She wore a simple but exquisitely tailored dark blue dress. Her face was familiar, yet impossibly different from their memory of it. It was no longer the soft, supportive face of a corporate wife. It was the face of a queen about to checkmate a king. It was Amelia Hayes. A wave of stunned silence rolled through the room. Jaws literally dropped. Board members exchanged shocked, confused glances. But Alistair's reaction was the most profound. All the color drained from his face. He looked as if he had seen a ghost, the ghost of a past he had tried to bury and forget. He stared at her, his mouth slightly agape, unable to form words. The arrogant, powerful titan of industry was, for the first time in his life, utterly speechless. Amelia walked calmly to the empty chair at the head of the table, directly opposite her ex-husband. She placed a slim leather portfolio in front of her and met his gaze. Her eyes were not filled with hatred or anger, but with something far more terrifying: indifference. "Good morning, Alistair," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the silence like a diamond blade. "You can call me Orion." The boardroom remained frozen in a state of collective shock. Alistair continued to stare at Amelia, his mind struggling to process the impossible reality before him. This was the woman he had dismissed as dead weight, the relic he had cast aside without a second thought. And here she was, the ghost at his feast, the architect of his ruin. "You," he finally managed to whisper, the single word a cocktail of disbelief, fury, and a dawning, horrifying understanding. "How?" Amelia ignored him, turning her calm, commanding gaze to the rest of the board. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice resonating with an authority none of them had ever heard from her. "For the last 5 years, my company, Phoenix Analytics, has become the world's leading predictive analysis firm. We advise sovereign wealth funds, global financial institutions, and governments. Our primary analytical tool, the Oracle Engine, has been tracking the decline of Finch innovations with precise empirical data. A decline that began long before today." She opened her portfolio and slid a dozen bound reports down the length of the polished table. "This isn't a hostile takeover based on greed," she continued, her tone clinical and devastating. "This is a rescue mission. Finch Innovations is a company suffering from a catastrophic failure of leadership. Billions have been squandered on vanity projects while the core technology has been allowed to atrophy. Talented employees have been driven away by a toxic, ego-driven culture. The brand, once a mark of innovation, is now a symbol of arrogance." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. She met the eyes of each board member, one by one. The disaster of the Nexus launch was not an isolated incident. It was the inevitable symptom of a deep-seated disease, a disease of hubris, personified by its CEO. Her eyes finally landed back on Alistair. He shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. "This is insane. She's my ex-wife. This is a personal vendetta. You can't possibly entertain this farce." Amelia didn't flinch. "Mr. Vance," she said, addressing the chairman, "Orion Capital is the majority shareholder and the primary debt holder of this company. I am not here to ask for your permission. I am here to inform you of the new reality. My first motion is a vote of no confidence in CEO Alistair Finch and a call for his immediate removal, effective today." She looked at David Chen, who had entered quietly behind her and stood by the door. "David, if you would." David distributed another set of documents. "In your hands," Amelia explained, "is a golden parachute package for Mr. Finch, which is far more generous than the one he afforded me. It includes a severance payment of $50,000. The poetic justice was so sharp, so brutal, it sucked the air out of the room. Alistair looked as if he had been physically struck. The symbolism was lost on no one. The vote was a mere formality. The board members, seeing the undeniable financial power Amelia now wielded, abandoned their loyalty to Alistair in a matter of seconds. It was a unanimous vote, save for Alistair's own abstention. "The motion carries," the chairman announced, his voice barely a whisper. "Alistair, you are relieved of your duties." It was over. 2 decades of power, erased in 2 minutes. Alistair sank back into his chair, a broken man. The fight had gone out of him, replaced by a hollow emptiness. He looked at Amelia, truly looked at her, and for the first time he didn't see the woman he had left behind. He saw the brilliant, formidable powerhouse she had been all along, the one he had been too blind and too insecure to acknowledge. "Why, Amelia?" he asked, his voice cracking. "After all this, why?" Amelia stood up and walked to the vast window overlooking the city, his window now hers. She looked down at the empire he had built and she had just conquered. "You asked me that same question once, in a lawyer's office," she said, her back to him. "You told me it was just business. You were half right. This was business. But you were wrong about something more important. You thought you left me with nothing, but you left me with the one thing I truly needed, my own name. You took everything from Mrs. Finch, so Amelia Hayes was free to build something for herself." She turned to face him one last time, her expression not of triumph, but of a profound final closure. "This wasn't just about tearing you down, Alistair. It's about building something better from the ashes, something that lasts. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run." Security guards materialized and politely escorted a stunned Alistair from the boardroom. The last thing he saw was Amelia Hayes taking his seat at the head of the table. Her team, her real team, assembling around her, ready to begin the real work. The next day, a single moving truck pulled up to the Finch Tower. A man in overalls carried out a single cardboard box filled with personal effects from the CEO's office. A stark, perfect mirror of the day Amelia's life had been packed away for her. Amelia stood in her new office, the CEO's office, looking not at the city, but at the reflection in the glass. She saw a woman who had been forged in fire, who had walked through hell and come out stronger. She had not only reclaimed her past, she had conquered her future. The silent partner was silent no more. The ghost in the machine now ran the whole damn company. And so, the empire built on arrogance fell, and a new one, built on brilliance and resilience, rose to take its place. Amelia Hayes' story is a powerful reminder that our greatest strength is often forged in our deepest wounds. It's a testament to the fact that you can take everything from someone, their home, their money, their history, but you can never take their potential. The person someone discards might just be the one who ends up owning the entire game. What did you think of Amelia's incredible journey from rock bottom to the very top? Could you have found that strength within yourself? If this story of karmic justice and ultimate triumph resonated with you, please hit that like button to let us know. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner power, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have so many more stories of epic comebacks and shocking twists that you won't want to miss. Thank you for watching.